It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion. Today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, it is time for Herd Mentality. We have a ton of great questions to get into today. Again, another week where I just have a lot of submissions, and so I did my best to kind of pick the ones that were most similar. And if there's talking points that I saw a lot of different people asking about, I prioritized it. So a lot to get into here today. I will say that I am recording this before we hear from Sean McDermott on Monday. So any big updates that he has in his press conference, I won't know about as I talk about these items today. First one comes from Bob. Bob says, I was curious about how you feel about Khalil Shakirs and if he deserves a larger role in the offense, especially as you mentioned on the show, the lack of production from Gabe Davis and company. He only has 2 catches, but if I remember correctly, they both came at pretty big moments in the game and on scoring drives. I know he's a rookie with a small sample size, but he seems to be producing when given the opportunity, and the moment doesn't seem too big for him. Also, I know you gave a shout out to the coaching staff, but I specifically wanted to bring to light the final sequences of the game. For Singletary to not score, to then get the first down and force Baltimore to burn their timeouts, and then the 2 kneel downs to chew clock and kick the game winner. Really well done by McDermott and company and the players for their execution. I can't believe I didn't mention that on the podcast yesterday, especially because I committed time to complimenting the coaching staff and the adjustments. Slipped my mind how good of a job they did with that sequence. We've seen teams lose games because they're not disciplined enough to not score a touchdown in that scenario and give the ball back to the other team, and they go score, and you lose. So, yes, a ton of credit to the coaching staff and players for executing that, especially Josh having the presence of mind on the quarterback sneak to not get more than the first down. And for Devin, as most of that Baltimore defense was trying to let him score, he had the discipline to not do it. So, yes, a ton of praise is warranted for that sequence. As for Khalil Shakirs, looks like he's going to have a big opportunity here. Jamison Crowder is going to be out for a while, if not the season. And so you have Isaiah McKenzie, who's in concussion protocol. You figure you get him back this week or next, right? You never want to be too assuming there, but feels like he'll be okay. He's doing his live podcast on Monday night. If he was having serious concussion symptoms, I would think he wouldn't do that. But yes, opportunity is coming for Khalil Shakirs. And while I think we have an urgency to talk about the offensive impact, my mind immediately goes to the punt return duties. Because Jamison Crowder's come in and done a very good job through 4 games of being the team's punt returner. And obviously, this is a role that we expect Khalil Shakirs to step into, and he did a great job in preseason. Obviously, the stakes are bigger. There's more pressure. But I like what he showed us in preseason. Now, along with that will come opportunities on offense. And to which I say good. I know that Shakir has a lot to prove, but this offense needs a little bit of a spark. They really do. There needs to be more production from the non-Josh Allens and Stefon Diggs of this offense. And hopefully Khalil Shakirs can step in and provide some of that. Now, I'm also not overlooking 2 guys on the practice squad in Tavon Austin and Isaiah Hodgins as players that could be put on this active roster and really given an opportunity to make some plays. especially Tavon Austin. So the Bills are deep when it comes to these receivers, and it looks like we're going to see some new opportunity ahead, especially for Khalil Shakirs. And I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic about what he can do for this football team. I think the most important thing is getting chemistry down with Josh and gaining trust from Josh. And as that develops, Shakir is a very talented player. Next one comes from Dean, who says, one thing I have noticed is that this year we seem to have a lot more tipped passes at the line of scrimmage. Is that a function of the offensive line not doing their job, or are the defenses just doing a really good job of getting into Josh's throwing lanes? Most of the interceptions so far this year have been the result of a tipped pass at the line of scrimmage, as well as a number of other passes that went incomplete. So yeah, let's talk about this. I have 3 numbers that tell the story. The first one is just acknowledging that what you're saying is true. 5.3% of Josh Allen's passes this year have been batted down at the line of scrimmage or tipped at the line of scrimmage. Last year, that was 3.7%. So a pretty good jump year over year, but it's even more significant when you consider the entire career. Josh Allen's career percentage, including this year, is 2.7%. This year only, it's 5.3. So we're talking about basically doubling what's normal for Josh Allen so far through 4 weeks. So yes, first of all, you're correct. This is happening at a higher clip. Number 2, and these 2 metrics tell us why. Average depth of target. Josh Allen's average depth of target so far in 2022 is 7.1 yards from the line of scrimmage. In 2021, that was 9.1 yards. And his career average is 9.4. So he's more than 2 yards under his career average and 2 yards exactly under his career average, or his average last year for average depth of target so far this year. So he's throwing the ball not as far down the field. Quicker passes, shorter passes lend themselves to more tip passes at the line. And then lastly, Josh Allen's average time to throw. So far this year, it's 2.63 seconds. Last year was 2.89 seconds, and his career average is 2.96. So he's throwing the ball quicker and less far, and that just invites more batted passes. So there you have it. There's your answer. It's structure. It's the structure of the offense and what he's being asked to do. It leads to more passes being batted at the line of scrimmage. The next one comes from Noah, who says, if I'm not mistaken, it looked like Damar Hamlin was the starter across from Jordan Poyer in this past game against the Ravens. I was wondering why you think this was. I feel like Jaquan has always been considered the next man up. Yeah, Noah, you're right about this. Damar Hamlin was the starter across from Jordan Poyer, and he played 100% of the snaps. And what I think this comes back to is being mindful of who you're replacing. You're replacing Micah Hyde. And I think the player that more naturally serves as a free safety that does the things that Micah did, it's more Damar Hamlin than it is Jaquan Johnson. If Jordan Poyer was the safety that was injured, I believe it would be Jaquan Johnson. And so while Poyer and Hyde are interchangeable together, the backups aren't the same way. And so my initial reaction was expecting Jaquan to get this opportunity because, you know, he had been there the longer amount of time, 4th season. But when you think about the skill set and what they're replacing, it does lean more into what Damar Hamlin offers. And so that's what I think this comes down to. And I wouldn't think matchup-wise that the reason Damar played over Jaquan was because of Baltimore, because if that were the case, Jaquan's the better downhill player, and that'd be the one you'd want in there against Baltimore. But Damar's played well. I think he's kept things in front of him. I think he's been close in coverage. He's had some good blitzes. So I like where that trajectory is. But I do think it just comes down to what they offer and who they're replacing. And that's why we're seeing Damar Hamlin over Jaquan Johnson. Andrew has a good one. He says, when do we get to see the fruits of having Aaron Kromer as our offensive line coach? Outside of Dawkins and Morse, the rest of the offensive line has been average at best. Saffold has been underwhelming. Bates has been inconsistent at best, and I haven't seen much of a jump at all from Spencer Brown. Is interior offensive line about to be mocked to the Bills in every single 2023 mock? Because it should be. Fair question, Andrew. And I think my answer here is hopefully very soon. Hopefully very soon we get to feel the fruits of having a sensational offensive line coach like Aaron Kromer running this unit. And I was certainly hoping it would be better sooner. I will say that at this point in the season right now, compared to where the line was last year at this same point, it is markedly better. I think the Bills' offensive line really struggled up into about the Tampa game last year. And then it hit its stride. So I think the Bills are ahead of where they were same point last year, but new scheme, especially run scheme, markedly different, adjusting to new techniques. Aaron Kromer is not shy about saying to his players that there's going to be you're going to have to play the game a different way to play for him, right? So there's some adjustment there. And then as we've talked about a few times, missed time in camp. I mean, Spencer Brown was hardly in the mix until 2 weeks prior to the season. Dawkins missed time. Saffold missed time. Bates missed time. They all missed time. And you talk about five guys working together as one, playing with new techniques and a new run scheme. Well, there's your answer. I think pass blocking has been very good. And so I would like to acknowledge that, but on the other side of things, the run blocking hasn't been there. Now, good news. The history of Aaron Kromer and run scheme and run blocking is elite. So it'll come. Our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I wanted to see what the hype was all about, and I'm glad I did. I take it to jumpstart my day, and it gives me more energy and balances my diet in a very simple way. Now, I've been on it for several weeks, and I love it. It doesn't taste like it's super healthy. It actually kind of has a mild tropical taste that I actually look forward to each morning. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It supports all the things. Athletic Greens is critical for my daily routine. It supports better sleep quality and recovery. It supports mental clarity and alertness. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. The next one today comes from Barry, who says, wanted to ask if it's safe to fully believe in Tremaine Edmonds yet. He made an open field tackle on J.K. Dobbins in the first half that made my jaw drop because he made it look so routine. Also, if the Bills decide to give him the big extension he's bound to get, what does that cost look like? Well, I mean, I don't know how you can't be really happy with Tremaine Edmonds and the way he's playing and along with Matt Milano. I think this has been probably the best 4-game stretch of that duo that we've seen yet. They are playing really good ball. And they're doing it with a better defensive line, but we hadn't seen Ed Oliver or Jordan Phillips in a couple weeks. And those guys are big time important for this unit. So I think there's another level for them to achieve. They're playing good in coverage. They're playing good in space. They're playing good off of each other. They're playing fast and physical. You can't convince me that there's a better pair of linebackers right now in the NFL than those two guys in the way that they're playing. And I hate to answer it this way, but in terms of my overall outlook on Tremaine Edmonds, I did like a 35-minute episode exclusively on Tremaine Edmonds, July 1st. It's titled Tremaine Edmonds, the Impact Areas for Improvement and the Looming Contract Extension. I could sit here and rehash it but I've done it. I put in the work, and I said everything I need to say about Tremaine Edmonds, and the best parts of Tremaine that I talked about in that episode are manifesting themselves with consistency right now. 24 years old. This guy's been the leader and middle linebacker for a top-tier NFL defense since he stepped into the league. You hear what the coaches say about him. You hear what the players say about him. You hear what opponents say about him. Tremaine's a good football player. And he's still improving. I hope he's back. I hope the Bills get this done. I really do. You talk about a young player that you drafted in the first round that has turned into this. That's a guy you keep around. That's a guy you keep around. I know it's tricky. I know the Bills don't have endless amounts of cap space, but this would be one I'd prioritize. What could that extension look like? Well, Spot Rack right now has Tremaine's estimated extension being 4 years, $57 million. That's an average of $14.2 million per season. I think that's probably pretty safe, maybe a little more. I would guess maybe around 15 per. You want a unicorn alien in the middle of your defense that's young? That's what it cost. But, man, I'm excited about Tremaine. Very, very excited. I hope he's around for a long time. Overseas Bills fan says Joe B said in the Buffalo Beat post-game podcast that he wouldn't be surprised if James Cook is inactive next week because of his mistakes and the fact that the coaches don't seem to trust him at the moment. However, I'd expect him to play and potentially have more opportunities in a game where the Bills will be heavy favorites. What would you predict? Yeah, I see both sides of this. James Cook's not really giving this team much right now, and you're talking about a guy who played 2 snaps, doesn't play special teams, and let's face it, not really trustworthy when you give him opportunities to make plays on offense. And there's a level of predictability when he steps on the field that the ball's going to him because he doesn't do anything else. And so, what do you do here? If he's not one of your best players, if he's not one of your best 48 players that you're going to dress on game day, how do you justify dressing him? Because you think you're going to blow out the Steelers and you want to give him some opportunities late in the game when it doesn't matter? Okay, but if he's not one of your best players, he's not one of your best players. I don't think you can ever go into a game with this assumption that you're going to blow the other team out. It's the NFL. You do that, you're going to get your ass beat. So I don't like that mindset either. I do see both sides of the coin. Here's where I'm at with James Cook. Right now, he can't help this football team. Right now, we just can't help this football team. And we're talking about a contender that needs to find their way on offense. And maybe James Cook can become part of it, but how do you find that out right now based on what he's shown you to this point? I'm much more interested in seeing Duke Johnson on this active roster. And I don't know how you get there. You'd have to be willing to move on from Zack Moss. And to me, Zack Moss is a replacement level player. And so I would have no issues cutting him and trying to put him back on the practice squad if he clears waivers. I would lose no sleep over not having Zack Moss anymore. But I think there's a good chance that Duke Johnson's the second best running back this team has. And the Bills need depth there. Devin Singletary played 88% of the snaps on Sunday. That's not where you want to be. That's not a good spot for a running back, especially when you have no depth. None. You have some potential in James Cook, but right now it just looks too big for him. So I don't know how the Bills perceive it. I don't think they look at Zack Moss the same way I do as a replacement level player. But I wish they did, because I'd like to see Duke Johnson as a number 2. Because I think he's the second best player at running back the Bills have. But will he be inactive? I think he will, and I think he should be inactive. You can't play teams. You can only play 2 snaps on offense. The starter has to play 88% because you keep messing up. How does that earning playing time? Next one comes from Michael. Michael says, can we get an update on yards after catch for Josh this year? I noticed 2 decent screens yesterday. Josh Allen so far this year, 4.5 yards after catch per completion. That's 26th in the NFL. Last year was 4.3 yards after catch per completion, which was dead last. So we're talking about 0.2 of a yard. That's how it's been better so far this year. So, and the average depth of target's coming down too, right? So you're throwing the ball 2 yards less further and you're getting the same yak. All right. I want this to be a thing so bad. I really do. You know, I look at Patrick Mahomes. He's up getting 6 yards after catch per completion. Josh is at 4.5. Some low-hanging opportunities there. But it hasn't become a thing yet for this offense. I hope it does at some point. I really do. Next one comes from Tyler. Tyler says, Kaiir Elam has now started 2 games, played a ton of snaps, and seemingly not been targeted by opposing teams. I don't feel like fans, unless they watch the All-22, have a good sense of how he is playing. Can you give us your take on what he has looked like on tape against the Finns and the Ravens? Well, I haven't seen the All-22 yet for the Baltimore game because it doesn't come out until Monday night. But, man, yeah, he's played well. He's played well. And just the fact that he's a rookie corner and at no point has another team picked on him, right? You know how this goes. Any smart quarterback, any smart coordinator is going to see a rookie corner or a guy that hasn't been tested, and they're going to test him. Hadn't happened. Has not happened yet. He's been on the field for 109 coverage snaps. He's given up 7 completions for 50 yards in 4 games. He's been targeted 10 times. 10 times, that's it, in 4 games. He's playing well, and he's actually playing the run well, too. I like how he's leveraging, and I like how he's competing as a physical player against the run. Really, really satisfied with Kaiir Elam. And I don't want to get way ahead of ourselves, but let's live in a world where all these corners are healthy. All of them. Trey White, Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, Kaiir Elam. What do you do? We've been dreaming of this problem, right? We've lived in this world where we've lived in fear of a injury at corner and what it looks like. But now the Bills got 4 guys that you feel like are pretty good players. And Trey White's an all-pro. Like, let's not forget how good that guy is. Trey White's a special player. And they got to sort it out between Dane Jackson, Kaiir Elam, and Christian Benford. Feels good, but man, the Bills finally got some corner depth. It took long enough, but they're in good shape. And obviously this coaching staff is so good when it comes to developing defensive backs and getting production out of them, regardless if they're a top-tier guy or a 6th-round pick. They get these guys ready to play. Between Coach McDermott, Leslie Frazier, John Butler, the secondary coach, Jim Salgado, Bobby Babich, these guys are awesome. These guys are awesome. BetOnline. Let's talk about it. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting information this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles, as well as analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website, betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. I got a few more to get to here today. The next one comes from John, who says, great win, but a continuing minor gripe I have with this offense still. Why doesn't Josh Allen QB sneak the ball more? Has the Titans fiasco last year made us terrified of it? There have been multiple 2nd, 3rd, or 4th and shorts this year where we either get stuffed in the backfield running the ball or throw an incomplete pass. We have a 6'5", 240-ish monster of a quarterback. Use him as it gives us a much higher percentage of getting the first down than any other play. Yeah, the Bills. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that short yardage in the Bills is not a good thing right now. Not a good thing. And can you QB sneak in and potentially do better? Yes. But as I think about the ways that the Bills can take something off of Josh Allen, something I talked a lot about in the offseason, this is the stuff you think about, right? Short yardage carries. Can you create some displacement and hand the ball to a running back and take that hit off of Josh Allen? And I think between Mitch Morse, look, he missed last game, and 2 weeks ago he was banged up with the elbow. He tried to play through it. So you really only have 2 games of healthy Mitch Morse, right, to think about. And obviously there's some level of concern about the displacement ability of this interior offensive line. There's just not a lot of comfort with all of that right now from the snap to center, or the center exchange, right? Like, that was an issue for 2 weeks. And then being able to get leverage and win. It's just, it's not happening right now. So, like, I hear you that a quarterback sneak would be better, but it's not better if you don't get push. So it's not great right now. There's no question about it. And you hear this from other fan bases lately too, where there's a level of frustration regarding a reluctance and ineffectiveness of quarterback sneaks. So I don't know exactly what the deal is with Buffalo, but I would guess Morse, lack of belief in displacement, and wanting to not expose Josh in those situations. Brian comes with a hard-hitting question. He says, not a Bills question, Joe, but instead looking for another episode of Detective Joe Marino, Uniform Fashion Police. Give us your opinions on the face masks without the upper crossbar that players like Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are sporting this season. Personally, I hate them. They look totally bizarre. I thought Len Dawson was back out there playing Sunday night. Brian, you know what's interesting is I was watching Dallas a couple weeks ago. I think it was the Giants primetime game. And I'm like, it was Zeke Elliott, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, why does he look like that? And it wasn't until I read your question that I realized, oh my God, that top crossbar is not there, and he looks weird. So I would agree with you that, like, aesthetically, it doesn't look good. It has a weird feel. It looks a little bit like Marvin the Martian a little bit. I don't know. I'm not digging it. I'm not digging it. I feel like it would be also weird to wear because you're probably used to having that weight right there at the top that comes with that crossbar. But obviously these guys like them. And it's probably only a matter of time before some player on the Bills wears it. But this is what I'll say. You have to like the way you look, right? You're going to perform at your best when you're comfortable with how you look. And so for those guys, if that's how they feel the most comfortable, then they're going to be at their best when they look like that. So you do what you got to do, but I personally don't like the look of the aesthetic. Next one comes from Ryan. Ryan says, not really a big question, but I'm thinking about your wife and all the Carolina Panthers fans out there today. Matt Rule being 1-26 when the opponent scores 17 points is atrocious. I'm thankful for Sean McDermott. He's consistently the most underrated coach in the league. Yeah, look, I live in Charlotte. My wife's a Carolina Panthers fan, and they are embarrassed. They are embarrassed of their football team. They're not proud of it. They think they have the worst coach in the league. They have a reasonable amount of talent, but obviously a not good quarterback situation that they've completely mismanaged. And bigger than that, they got one of those owners, Dave Tepper, richest owner in the league. He doesn't do a good enough job of getting out of the way. The best owners are the ones that get the heck out of the way and write checks to people to make football decisions that are football people. And that's just not Dave Tepper. He's hands-on, and he hasn't gotten to the point yet where he's established enough, but he's got so many Jerry Jones tendencies to him. And I don't know that we haven't lived this world for a while where you have bad ownership. But when you hear stuff like top down, and the more you study the league and the more you study different tenures from GMs and coaches, ownership is such a big thing. Such a big thing. And I know that it's easy to sit back and say, well, what does ownership have to do with the performance of a quarterback or an offensive line? There is a top-down dynamic that bleeds into every piece of the organization. And I'm fearful that Carolina is going to be one of those teams that never quite figures it out because Dave Tepper can't get himself out of the way. So they got coaching problems. They got a quarterback problem. Their biggest problem, though, is that this owner is a complete wild card. Complete wild card. He's very hasty, and I know that sounds weird because he's held on to Matt Rule to this point, but when you look at some of the things that he's done in the community, you just don't get a good feel with what fell through with them building the complex in South Carolina, some of the decisions that he's made at the stadium. I think they got an ownership problem, and I get nervous about this team to be consistently good at any point with Dave Tepper as the owner. But yeah, they're embarrassed, and they know it. They know it. This has become a depressed football town. Really haven't been good since 2015. They've seen what's happened in Buffalo, and they're jealous. They're like, we let Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane out of here. Not good. It's not good. Next one comes from Mihal, who says, when evaluating offensive line talents, what traits make the difference between whether someone should play center, guard, or tackle? More specifically, can scouts know in advance whether someone should play on the left side or the right side? So as for left side, right side, usually you kind of buy into where they've played, right? So if this guy's played a 3-year starter on the left side, you kind of think of him as a left side player that has to prove themselves on the right side. Coach Cromer, in my conversations with him, he will tell you that it shouldn't matter because if you're going to run block, you're going to have to run block left and you're going to have to run block right, so it shouldn't matter. And if you have to pass block, you have to be able to protect your outside hip and your inside hip, so you should be able to flip. So that's changed my perspective on it quite a bit. I think where things get more interesting is when you start to forecast players to offensive tackle, guard, and center. Part of that has to do with the scheme that you run. But generally speaking, your offensive tackles are your longer armed, quicker feet, lateral mobility type players, guys that can win in space and on an island without bumpers, right? A lot of times there's nobody outside of them. So you have to have the foot speed to set up roadblocks in your pass set to frame rushers and obviously have a lot of length to get your hands on these really athletic guys like Von Miller and Joey Bosa and all these great edge rushers, Myles Garrett. Your players that you look at to play guard, everything happens a little bit quicker on the interior and you're facing bigger players on the inside. So you need to be able to absorb and redirect power very well on the inside and handle things that happen quicker. And you almost have to be a little bit smarter because you're going to be faced with more twists and stunts and you have to be more reactive and a better processor. And then at center, you got to be able to snap. That matters. But also your centers where you can kind of get away with a lighter player because not as frequently are they going to have somebody stacked right on top of them like you will at guard. So the snap ability, the snap to step quickness, your ability to get out in space, right? Poles, climbing the second level, processing's huge at center. You have to have leadership, that ability to make line calls and set protections. So that's kind of what goes into those dynamics. And then Mihal had a second question who said, how do we evaluate a safety's performance relative to the rest of the league? Is it picks, tackles, or something intangible? Well, intangibles matter a lot, but in terms of watching it on tape, you can't watch broadcast tape and really have a feel for how good a safety is. You got to watch all 22 because most of the time the safeties aren't in your picture. So how do you know how they're playing if you can't see them? But safeties, I evaluate safeties by being mindful of how good of a job do they process, right? What do they do on the back end to get to their coverage landmarks and restrict throwing windows? How do they see what's happening in front of them and get to landmarks that restricts throwing windows? And when they're challenged, can they make plays on the ball? And do they tackle? What is their downhill trigger like? Do they take good angles? Do they trigger well? And do they fit the run well? Are they passive? Are they guys that want to be spectators and watch everyone else make tackles? Or are they willing to stick their nose in the pile and be physical? That's what I'm looking for. That's how I evaluate safeties' performances. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I enjoyed this. Thank you for all the great questions, and my apologies to the outstanding questions I didn't have a chance to get to this week. I do appreciate everyone who takes the time to submit something. Tomorrow, we really shift our focus to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It'll be our comprehensive primer. We'll get ready for that team from every angle. So come on back and don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.